The water level at Three Gorges Dam just crossed 145 meters. That number matters. 145 meters is the official flood control line, the level at which dam operators are required by Chinese government protocol to start releasing water downstream. And right now, as China enters the 2026 flood season, the reservoir is already sitting at that threshold, before the heaviest rains have even arrived. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what that number means for the 400 million people living downstream. Stay until the end. I'll show you what China's own hydrological data reveals about what happens when that level keeps climbing. Welcome back. Spec It Up covers one story, the Three Gorges Dam, and right now, that story is moving fast. The 2026 flood season has officially begun. The Yangtze basin has entered its monsoon window. Upstream tributaries are already reporting elevated inflows, and the dam's water level, which is supposed to be drawn down to 145 meters before flood season starts, is already at that exact line. Let's break down what that means. Here's the baseline you need to understand Three Gorges Dam. The dam stands 185 meters tall. The maximum operational water level, the highest the reservoir is ever supposed to reach, is 175 meters. The flood control line is 145 meters. That 30-meter gap between 145 and 175 is the entire flood storage buffer. It's the only thing standing between normal operations and a crisis. That buffer represents 22.15 billion cubic meters of capacity. Sounds enormous, but the Yangtze River Basin receives nearly 1 trillion cubic meters of runoff per year, and 70 to 80% of that runoff arrives during the flood season, which runs from June through September. The dam's entire flood buffer can absorb roughly 2 to 3% of a single season's water volume if conditions turn extreme. So, when the dam enters flood season, with the reservoir already at 145 meters, not drawn down, not with extra buffer, that 30-meter window is the only thing between controlled operations and emergency discharge. If you want daily updates on exactly where that level is going this season, subscribe right now. I publish every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and during peak flood events, more frequently. When the water level climbs above 145 meters, operators face a brutal trade-off. They can hold the water, let the reservoir fill, which protects the communities immediately downstream from a sudden surge. But every meter of rise reduces the remaining safety buffer. At 155 meters, they're 20 meters from the operational maximum. At 165, they're 10 meters away. At 170, which the reservoir reached in 2020, they're in emergency territory. Or they can release, open the spillways and send water downstream at controlled rates. That protects the dam. But downstream, cities like Yichang, Wuhan, and Nanjing have to absorb that discharge. In 2020, the last major flood season, operators discharged at a peak of nearly 49,000 cubic meters per second. Rivers in the middle and lower Yangtze overflowed their banks. Over 60 million people were affected. This is the fundamental problem with Three Gorges Dam that China doesn't advertise. The dam can moderate floods, but it cannot stop them. When the rain keeps coming, eventually you have to open the gates. And when you do, you are choosing which communities downstream take the hit. What we're about to show you next is what China hides most, the actual inflow data that tells you how much stress the dam is under right now. Stay with us. Let's talk about what's coming toward the dam right now. China's flood season officially began June 1st. In the first weeks of the monsoon window, the Yangtze Basin's upper tributaries, the Min River, the Jialing River, the Wu River, begin feeding elevated water volumes into the reservoir. Inflow rates below 15,000 cubic meters per second are considered manageable. At 25,000 to 30,000, dam operators begin raising discharge. During the 2020 peak, inflow hit 75,000 cubic meters per second, the highest recorded since the dam's construction. That triggered the opening of all 11 spillway outlets simultaneously. The official threshold that triggers a flood number 1 declaration from China's Ministry of Water Resources is when inflow at the Yichang measuring station, just below the dam, consistently exceeds 25,000 cubic meters per second. Based on the seasonal patterns of the past decade, that threshold is typically crossed somewhere between late June and mid-July. We are now in that window. Let me put a human face on what these numbers mean. The Yangtze River Basin is home to approximately 400 million people. The cities along the middle and lower Yangtze, Yichang, Jingzhou, Wuhan, Nanjing, Shanghai, are among China's most densely populated urban corridors. When dam operators open the spillways, those cities receive the water. Flood walls help, the dam helps, but the system is not designed for extreme events. In 2020, 185 hydrological monitoring stations along the Yangtze exceeded their flood warning marks simultaneously. 38 million people were evacuated across Hubei, Hunan, Jiangxi, and Anhui provinces. Agricultural losses ran into billions of yuan. What you almost never hear in official Chinese communications is this. The Three Gorges Dam's flood control capacity covers approximately 2 to 3% of an extreme flood year's total runoff. The other 97% goes somewhere. It goes through cities, it goes over farmland, it displaces families. It doesn't solve the problem. So what are the specific signals that tell you this season is escalating? First, watch the reservoir level. If it climbs above 155 meters before July 15th, that is early season stress. In normal years, the level doesn't approach 155 until late July at the earliest. Second, watch inflow rates. The Changjiang Water Resources Commission publishes inflow data. If you see numbers above 40,000 cubic meters per second, that's a serious flood event in progress. Above 60,000 is the alarm zone. Third, watch the number of spillway gates open. In 2020, China opened all 11 simultaneously for the first time in recorded history. If we see 6 or more open simultaneously this season, that's your signal that something significant is happening. Fourth, watch for official silence. In 2020, Chinese state media repeatedly downplayed the flood situation, while satellite imagery told a completely different story. If official reporting becomes sparse or unusually positive, watch what the satellite data shows. I'll be covering all of these signals in real time this season. The 2026 flood season is just beginning. The dam is already at the flood control line. The monsoon window is open. Upstream tributaries are feeding in. Whether this becomes a repeat of 2020 or something worse depends on what the next 6 weeks of rainfall look like. And I'll be here tracking every update. So here's my question for you, and I want you to answer in the comments right now. Do you think the Three Gorges Dam can handle a 2020 level flood again in 2026? Yes or no? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment, and the most interesting responses drive the next video. If you found this useful, subscribe. I publish Three Gorges Dam updates every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and daily when conditions escalate. The next video covers something that China's own scientists discovered underneath the dam. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you in the next one.